Good afternoon. Thank you for staying for the afternoon session of our lung map update. And this is our annual lung map update. And we have been talking about some of the trials and some of the lung sessions earlier, and we'll provide some other discussion today. So here we have our agenda. We'll have some time for questions and answers. We'll be hearing about our accrual and manuscripts from Mary Redman and some of the activities of our accrual enhancement committee and our website, which I think the updates are important to stay on top of all of the new trials and new updates for LungMap, and Frank DeSanto will be presenting. Then we'll hear about our trials, 1900G, J, K, and 1800E, and then we'll do some question and answer. We'll talk about a little bit about a trial that's in development, 1900N, and then some practical ways to engage with our drug selection committee from our drug selection committee chair, Dr. Dragnev, and our TM committee with Dr. Neal, who will be virtual. So we've got a full agenda today, and I just wanted to welcome you on behalf of myself and Dr. Wakar, who is not able to join us but online today, and our statistical co-chair, Mary Redman. And we have had a good year, and I think the biggest update for this year is we now have a year of LungMap 3.0 under our belts, and we are now allowing for a broader panel of NGS to be used, and so patients who were previously tested, we can use many of the tests that you're using in your own clinics. And with that, we have just opened our unmatched sub-study in the past 6 months, and now we're starting to see more and more of these patients getting enrolled and getting assigned. So we're excited to see the number of studies increasing, to have an unmatched sub-study, and to engage all of you. And so some of our pieces that we're proud of and we want to mention here. So Judy Johnson, again, was supposed to be here but couldn't make it, but she's our patient advocate. She's been a patient advocate for both the Lung Committee and for LungMap, and has had 10 years of service as of February of 2026, she'll be rolling off of her term. And interestingly, as we've been discussing her efforts and her engagement with the Lung Committee and the LungMap, she's done the work of 2 to 3 advocates over time with the sheer number of studies that she's reviewed and had an impact on. So everything that we've done in the Lung Committee over the last decade has really been touched by Judy. And so she's not here today, but we want to thank her and all of her efforts, and we'll be, if we cross her path again, she will stay in the advocacy arena for cancer and lung cancer, and wish her the best, and hope to have a new advocate in her place next year. Some other accomplishments. So we really wanted to acknowledge some of the sites that are enrolling well. And so here we have Palo Alto Medical Foundation in Sunnyvale, the Edwards Comprehensive Cancer Center in Huntington, West Virginia, Sutter Pacific Medical Foundation in Santa Rosa, California, Harold Alphonse Center for Cancer Care in Augusta, Maine, University of Kansas Hospital at Westwood in Kansas, Mercy Hospital in St. Louis, Missouri, St. Mary's Medical Center in Huntington, West Virginia, the University of New Mexico Cancer Center in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Hillman, UPMC Hillman Cancer Center in Monroeville, Pennsylvania, Eastern Maine Medical Center, Medical Center Cancer Care in Brewer, Maine, Palo Alto Medical Foundation Healthcare in Palo Alto, California, Robert H. Johnson VA Medical Center in Charleston, South Carolina, and St. Vincent Hospital Cancer Center at St. Mary's in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And I think what you can see from this list, I want to thank, maybe we can just have a round of applause for, and we're hoping in the future to have some swag to go along with this congratulations. We're working on that. But I think what's impressive to me, and I wanted to read these off to you, is because it's not one location. this is across the United States that we're representing. And so, again, it's one thing that we pride ourselves in with LungMap, but it is really true that across the United States, we are engaging sites and patients. So our top accruing investigators in the last 12 months, Kim Song-Win, Zayed Kenan, Xiao Yang, Tony Pacchiolis, Mohammed Jamil, Alexandra Lupek, Moises Hari Tariq, Gary Kiefer, our own Tina Lee, David Grotscholchen, Hai Wen, and Nasa Tajida. And I apologize if I misspoke on anybody's name, but obviously they're from most of the medical centers that we just discussed as the top enrolling sites. But thank you. Another round of applause, if you will. And then just sites that recently enrolled the first patients in the last 4 months. And again, we appreciate the engagement. We want all of the sites that have been enrolling well to continue to enroll well, but we welcome and congratulate those who are starting to enroll. And I won't read this whole list, but we appreciate you and again, hope that you continue to be engaged with LungMap. So I will leave this to Mary, to Dr. Redmond, and to talk about manuscripts and accrual updates.
Great, thanks. Okay, well, hello everyone. I wanted to start with, well, first of all, it's just lovely to see all of you here. I know it's been a long day, and so appreciate that you all were able to attend. And wanted to share just a brief look at where we are in terms of accrual with LungMap, particularly as the amendment to allow for outside NGS test results was implemented just around a year ago. And how many of you know that we have an accrual report that you can access that's a publicly open website that's updated daily? Well, there's like somebody in the back who actually helps program it, but you know. So this is a snapshot of that report, and I highly encourage, if you don't know where this report is, that you can ask us. We'd be happy to tell you. So just to take a peek at this, you can see it presents the accrual over the last 7 days, 30 days, 3 months, 6 months, and then total. And when I look at this report, I'm always looking to think about, well, totals, but also trends. And so the last 7 days, I think, well, 4 times 7 is around 30 days. So I want to see that that number is related to 30 days, but really that's more variable. But I look at 30 days and think, okay, so 38 in the last 30 days times 3, which would be 3 months. Okay, we've actually accrued more patients in the last 30 days than the average over the last 3 months. So that's an improvement. I do the same thing. I double the 90 to look for 3 months to look at 6 months. So we've, over the last 3 months, have been accruing more patients than we had over 6 months, and we've done even better over the last 30 days. And that's to say that it just takes time for accrual to pick up when you make major amendments, like the change for NGS testing, and also that we added in S1800E. So I think this time next year, you're going to see that accrual is even better than it is right now. And so I think that we're doing really well. You can also see on this report that we're about 50% patients being screened at progression versus pre-screened. But also you can see on this report that we are allowing patients who have treatment-naive advanced non-small cell lung cancer to screen for an S1900K. And we've had 10 patients who have done that approach, and most of those patients have actually enrolled onto the trial. So there's a lot on this report that says some really great things, but I also just want to point out that we've had 13 patients who have been registered to a sub-study in the last 30 days, which is an improvement over the averages prior to that. So again, next year, or even look at this in 6 months, and you'll see that things are looking really, really great. So I'm going to move on from accrual, but again, please ask us if you need to know more information or where the information is stored. So I wanted to go through some manuscript and just publication updates and then some planned publication updates that have happened since last October. In terms of sub-study publications since October of 2024, at ASCO this year, Dr. Suki Pada presented the S1800E data that looked at the role of sotorasib within different subsets of KRAS G12C, so by co-mutation. And that data were quite compelling to suggest that the TP53 cohort and the STK11, the TP53 cohort and then an all others cohort, they didn't differ in their activity on average, but the STK11 cohort suggested that maybe those patients weren't benefiting as much from sotorasib. And that paper is in the works, and we expect to publish that within the next 6 months, would be my guess. In terms of translational medicine publications since last year, we've had 2 papers that have been published. The analysis of the NGS data from the first lung map, the S1400 data, was published last December in Journal of Thoracic Oncology with Dr. David Kozino as the primary author, and some interesting results looking at both co-occurring but also mutually exclusive alterations that we found in squamous cell lung cancers that had not been previously found. So I suggest if you haven't looked at that paper, go take a look. I think it's a really nice paper. And then the second publication that we've had in the last year is actually more recent data looking at the lung map, all caps data since 2019, where we had a requirement for patients who were having a fresh tissue biopsy to submit tissue on study, that they also had to submit blood so that we could do ctDNA testing and evaluate the correlation between what we find in tissue and what we find in blood. And this is a pretty novel resource of data, because most of the data sets that are evaluating the correlation between ctDNA and tissue were from first line or earlier stage, and this is a previously treated setting in advanced non-small cell lung cancer. And so these data are, I think, really quite interesting, and not only did we show that there's great concurrence between what you'd find in blood that you have in tissue, but we also looked at the role of tumor fraction, which is so the amount of tumor that you have in the blood sample, and that the higher tumor fraction, you had a better chance of detecting what was in the tissue in the blood. Also, we also found that higher tumor fraction was a poor prognostic factor. So again, if you haven't seen that paper, I highly recommend taking a look at that. And then we have a series of sub-study primary manuscripts that are in the works. S1900A, which is a study that was led by Dr. Jonathan Rees, which was looking at some typos here and here that was not sotorasib. We had a PARP inhibitor. Obviously, there were some cut and paste issues on my part. I thought I fixed it, but I didn't. That rucaparib is the drug, and that was looking at patients who had BRCA alterations or high LOH, and so there's a series of analyses that were conducted within that. The study overall was not positive, but those of you who attended the plenary just now saw Dr. Gandera present on that data, and that there was some interesting results looking at patients who had biallelic BRCA, and that so there's some subsets potentially that would be benefiting from rucaparib versus overall. The next study that we have in the works in terms of being published is S1900C, which is a study looking at participants with STK11 genomic alterations, and they were giving talazoparib and avelumab. The study overall was negative. It was presented at ASCO in 2021, but I think the major outcome of that study is that this is just a really poor prognosis population, and so finding good treatment options for them is really important. I talked to you about S1900E, the study that was just presented at ASCO looking at sotorasib, and the publication should be coming soon. And then the finally paper that we're working on in terms of primary manuscripts is S1800D, and that's a study that was evaluating N802, which is an IL-15 therapy, combined with pembrolizumab for patients who had already received immune checkpoint inhibitor therapy and chemotherapy. The study overall was negative, but there's also some really interesting results in that as well. And then we have a series of ancillary projects that we're working on. And they're listed here, and I just wanted to highlight these very quickly. The first is that the entire lung map leadership came together with to develop a consensus statement or manuscript to describe who should be considered acquired resistance, who should be considered primary resistance, and what are the ones that maybe we'd have to think differently about when it comes to patients who have already received immunotherapy and are going on to receive subsequent lines of therapy. We submitted this manuscript to Journal of Clinical Oncology's Comments and Controversies. Dr. Debbie Doroshow is the primary author on that in collaboration with Tiziana Leal, Simon Wakar, myself, and Karen Reckamp. We did just get some comments back, so I think that we have some work to do, but I have some, great optimism that we're going to be able to publish that soon. We did some analysis of ctDNA, both at baseline and on treatment and at progression on S1800A, the predecessor study to the Pragmatica lung. No major results found, but we're working on that publication, and I think that should be informative as well. And then we have these 4 final projects looking at the association between the grade of immune-related adverse events and outcomes. That project's being led by Dr. Diane Sang. We're looking at the role of docetaxel pre and post immunotherapy, and if there's a difference in outcomes there. That's being led by Dr. Christine Albarl. There's a project looking at KRAS and smoking and other factors in the lung map screening. That project is to be led by Dr. Bruna Pellini. And then finally, we just are about to get data on from the PROPHET or OncoHost proteomic analysis that Dr. Gandera spoke a little bit about that assay in the plenary, looking at S1800A, and Dr. Surbhi Singhal is the lead for that. So we have a lot going on, and we're excited that we have all of this to do, and we want more ideas from all of you. And so I'll finish with that and turn it over to Frank.
So thank you for the chance to provide you with an update of work the Accrual Enhancement Committee has done over the past year. Present on behalf of my colleagues on the committee. There we go. So as we know, LungMap 3.0 activated just about a year ago. And we've worked to spread word about the expanded NGS testing options and the benefits that come with those changes. And steps we've taken have included a press release and other media outreach. We've worked with Dr. Belenky to raise awareness within SWOG in venues such as his Frontline blog and the group meeting plenary. We continue to do social media messaging. We continue to do outreach to advocacy organizations, and our LungMap newsletters to sites highlight some of the benefits and the new non-match sub-study and whatnot. And we've made quite a few enhancements to the lungmap.org website over the past year, and I will delve into details on some of those, all of those items actually. So this is probably the most significant website expansion and set of updates since we launched lungmap.org in 2014. So we've added LungMap 3.0 messaging in a number of places, and with extensive input from our study leadership, we've revamped the presentation of the LungMap governance structure and leadership. So it focuses more now on roles and how the components are related. We include a schema diagramming the governance structure. We provide, for the most part, we provide names of committee chairs with descriptions of the committee membership or the committee role, rather than a full list of committee members. It's both more descriptive overall of how LungMap works, and it will be easier to maintain, keep up to date. We've updated the patient content in a number of ways and added, of course, LungMap 3.0 information to that. At last year's retreat, leadership developed vision and mission statements, and we've added those to the website. And probably the biggest update is a news section directed to potential industry partners. Primarily, it's making the case for why they should consider working with the LungMap team. And of course, given that we're a federally supported project earlier this year, based on White House directives, we made some updates to language throughout the site. Some other steps we've taken to raise awareness included working with Dr. Reckamp to pitch a LungMap 3.0 editorial to the ASCO Post, given its wide reach among oncology researchers. That was published earlier this year. We also issued a press release to help raise awareness among the general public and patients and families. And the timing of this meant it was also a good opportunity to get out word about the advocacy webinar that we had been planning. And of course, partnerships with patient advocacy organizations have been an integral part of LungMap since its inception, since before its launch, of course. And over the past several years, we've engaged the larger lung advocacy community in a number of webinars to help inform them of how LungMap has evolved and to get feedback from them in terms of changing patient priorities. We held an event in May that went extremely well. This slide lists attendance at over 300, and that's a bit of an error on my part, but registrations were over 300. And that's about twice as many as who had registered for our most recent webinar before this. Our partners at Friends of Cancer Research do much of the planning and execution for these webinars, and they do it extremely well. And so one of the things they've done is provided us some statistics to indicate how successful this particular webinar was. So 52% of those 300 plus registrants actually attended, and that compares to 38% average for webinars hosted by nonprofits generally. The people who registered and attended included many advocates and advocacy organizations, and also a number of industry representatives. We had at least 6 companies represented. The recording is posted on YouTube. That's gotten more than 200 views at this point. And one final data point, the average watch time for the attendees during the event was 50 minutes, which I think indicates the high level of engagement and interest. In terms of outreach to sites, our LungMap newsletter goes out roughly quarterly. And recent content has, of course, focused on the benefits of LungMap 3.0. We provide details of new sub-studies, revisions, information on revisions to ongoing studies. Last issue, we included a patient testimonial. And of course, we try to provide information on upcoming educational events. This most recent newsletter, which went out last week, 2 weeks ago, in it we've taken a somewhat new approach to highlighting top accruers, trying to focus on, rather than overall accrual numbers for institutions, just what they've done in roughly the past 12 months, both sites and individual investigators. Of course, Dr. Reckamp just recognized the investigators and sites on those lists. And we've also started including a list of sites that have had their first enrollment to LungMap since the last edition of our newsletter. And we're talking about, for future editions of the newsletter, trying to put that recognition on the first page, actually, so that those top accruers would appear there. And we've talked about other ways of also recognizing them, such as SWOG, as Dr. RecAmp mentioned, including photos, things of that nature. Patient profiles, this is something that we will be trying to do more of, and this is just a quote from someone we interviewed a few months back, whose story is quite moving. He's spent 2 years on LungMap S1800D treatment without progressing, and I just earlier today spoke with Jackie, who was part of his care provider team at his site, and it's been 2.5 years at this point, and he's still no progression. So. We continue LungMap 3.0 messaging and messaging about events like our advocacy webinar and launching of new trials on our social media outreach. And a fair amount of our social media outreach actually goes out on SWOG's several social media accounts and via our partner organization accounts, Friends and FNIH. During my last report on Accrual Enhancement Committee efforts, we had talked about the challenge of cancer centers that don't open all of the sub-studies because they expect some to accrue poorly, or they close some early because of poor accrual, and about what we could do to get out the message to them that they should be looking at master protocols differently in terms of accounting for protocol for accrual. Obviously, there are other master protocols going on at the NCI, and so we spoke to leadership on some of those, primarily leadership on MyeloMatch. We drafted a message, and that message went out earlier this year from leadership of the NCI's Division of Cancer Treatment and Diagnosis. That message focused primarily on MyeloMatch, and so we've talked about wanting to follow that up with a message that sort of echoes those same points but focuses on LungMap. Of course, it's an open question when the time will be right for doing that. And
Can I make a comment on that
yeah,
point?
please.
So I don't think that message is coming from NCI to the cancer centers. In fact, they're being pressured to close poor accruing studies regardless of how rare the tumor type is.
Oh.
So I can just tell you from my personal experience. So I think maybe we need another conversation specifically about LungMap.
Thank you. And just a pitch for resources we provide for all sub-studies. Our patient-friendly summaries, when S1900N is released, you'll be able to go to swog.org/S1900N to get that summary for your patients. And of course, social media outreach for all new sub-studies. I talked a little bit about changes we made to the website. With the added LungMap 3.0 messaging and outreach and the changes made to the website, we've got some stats on the impact those changes have had in terms of traffic. Our partners at Friends of Cancer Research have, they created the original website and they've operated it since 2014. And they're the ones who put together this report. Some quick numbers comparing the year May 2023 to May 2024 to May 2024 to 2025. Number of views have went up significantly. Number of events per session. Events are essentially clicks or visits to other pages. The event count per user have gone up. The average engagement time per active user is something that I think we want to work on a little more. Top performing page is obviously the home page. And one of our challenges is how to get visitors onto inner pages. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Most of our traffic is via desktops versus mobile, which is a little bit unusual. This breakdown, 90% desktop really. And then looking at language breakdown, 90% English there, no surprise there. This was a little bit surprising traffic by location. About 3/4 of our traffic is from the Americas, but we have significant fractions visiting from Europe and Asia as well. A quick rundown of some of the changes that were made to the pages that were changed, and most of those changes were rolled out in January of this year. One of the best things you can do with a website to increase traffic, increase search engine rankings is just update the content. And so that explains part of the increased traffic. The team at Friends also put together a set of recommendations, which we've discussed in the AEC meeting and need to discuss further. And one of those is to increase awareness of lungmap.org by including links to it in more publications, more media, enrollment announcements. Obviously, we include it in newsletters, but there are materials we put together for events, for educational webinars and whatnot, and those are all opportunities to advertise it a little more, increase traffic. To increase the amount of time visitors are spending on the site, one of the things we talked about was promoting the Find a Trial Location page on here so that more sites, more patients could come there to find locations. Considering the possibility of adding pop-ups on the homepage to get people to click through to other pages within the site. I'm not sure how advisable that is, but something we're discussing. Increasing the number of our social media messages that refer to lungmap.org would be another step to take. And continue to create content designed for desktop use, which is obviously where most of our users are coming from. Thank you. Anyone who has questions or suggestions?
I think we'll save the questions for after we're done with the other trials, as we need to catch up a little bit. But thank you, Frank.
Got it.
That was great.
Thanks.
So next we have Sarah Goldberg, who will present S1900G. It's our phase 2 trial of capmatinib plus osimertinib with or without ramucirumab for participants with EGFR mutant MET amplified stage 4 non-small cell lung cancer.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. So a lot has changed in the last even couple of months as we think about treating patients with EGFR mutant lung cancer. But the general paradigm has remained the same and hasn't changed, I think, the importance of this trial. So just to give you some background on how we think about EGFR mutant lung cancer, I've showed this slide before, but people tell me they like it, so I'm going to show it again. So a newly diagnosed patient with EGFR mutant lung cancer with metastatic disease is still, to this day, treated with an EGFR tyrosine kinase inhibitor. We used to typically give osimertinib alone. Now, more and more, we're giving combinations, sometimes with chemotherapy. But either way, typically patients do well for a period of time. You can see here in this picture the tumors are shrinking, but then with ongoing treatment, no one is cured, unfortunately, and resistance develops and tumors grow, either in this case, the same ones that were there before or new ones.
So at the time of resistance to osimertinib in this case, or other EGFR TKIs, there's different ways to test the mechanism of resistance. You can check blood for circulating tumor DNA, or you can get a tumor biopsy. And so what do you find at the time of resistance to osimertinib? Well, you can find a lot of different things. But what this study is focused on, and I wanted to highlight here, is that MET amplification is a relatively more common mechanism of resistance. It's a bit varied in different studies in the frequency, but it's somewhere maybe around 10 or 15% of patients who become resistant to osimertinib. So this is something that has been studied for some time now, trying to overcome this mechanism of resistance. And I just wanted to show you a fairly recent study that was just presented a few months ago at ASCO. And there's been several other studies for these patients as well. But this study was, again, for patients with EGFR mutant lung cancer who developed MET amplification as a mechanism of resistance. And they were treated with the MET inhibitor savolitinib plus osimertinib compared to chemotherapy. And I think you can see here clearly these patients who were treated with the MET inhibitor with continuation of osimertinib did better than chemotherapy. The response rate here was almost 60%. The duration of response was a bit over 8 months. And you can see the progression-free survival in the top left there. So nearly all the patients or all the different subsets were benefiting. So this seems to be a really promising strategy. It's not yet FDA approved to give a MET inhibitor, although it is in the NCCN guidelines. So this is something we often will do off-label, is try to give patients with MET amplification a MET inhibitor. The issue is, again, we're not having very long duration of responses for most patients, and so this study is trying to do better. So why might we think about adding a VEGF inhibitor, as S1900G does, to this combination? Well, we know that in several different studies for patients with EGFR mutant lung cancer, adding a VEGF or VEGFR2 inhibitor can improve outcomes, specifically progression-free survival. I'm showing you one example here. There's also preclinical data that demonstrates crosstalk between VEGF and MET signaling. And also some preclinical studies show that inhibiting both EGFR, MET, and VEGF can overcome resistance or delay resistance to EGFR TKIs. The other thing, and this was mentioned briefly before, is that not only do we think it's possible that we can improve efficacy, we might be able to improve toxicity by adding another drug. It's a rare situation where you can add a third drug or an additional drug, but improve toxicity. But we think that the addition of a VEGF inhibitor might do that because of the significant edema we often see with MET inhibitors, that VEGF inhibitors might help. So all of that leading up to the schema of S1900G. So again, this is for patients with advanced EGFR mutant lung cancer. They have to have had at least one prior EGFR TKI, and osimertinib has to be in the most recent line of therapy, although they could have had several different lines of therapy, or just one. And so all of these patients have to have MET amplification because that's what we're trying to target. And the MET amplification has to be detected at the time of resistance, as I showed you before why that was important. They could have had chemo or immune therapy or both, but it's not required. Patients can have had prior amivantamab, another drug we often use for these patients, but they can have had a prior MET tyrosine kinase inhibitor. And they also can have had prior VEGF pathway inhibitors. So if they were on the ECOG study with osimertinib and bevacizumab, they can still be eligible for this trial. And untreated asymptomatic brain metastases are allowed. And the patients are randomized 1-to-1 to the triplet of osimertinib plus capmatinib, which is a MET inhibitor, plus ramucirumab, a VEGF pathway inhibitor, versus just the EGFR and the MET inhibitor without ramucirumab, so osimertinib and capmatinib. The primary endpoint is progression-free survival. And the font that's in red here, or the text that's in red here, is just to show a little bit of the changes that that we just put out with a recent amendment. And so one of the changes is that we now have fewer patients that we're looking for. So we have a goal of 40 eligible patients. And the other change you can see in red here is that we added secondary endpoints looking at edema and change in weight, because we really think that this might be a significant difference between the two arms, that we might see improvements in the development of edema and weight gain with the addition of ramucirumab. So very briefly, how do we find these biomarkers? I get asked these questions a lot, so I wanted to cover them here. All of these patients at baseline will have an EGFR mutation in their tumor. That's just the patient population we're looking for. Again, MET amplification is something that has to be detected after progression on osimertinib. Any level of MET amplification is allowed. So if your report says MET amplification, check, they're allowed. It doesn't matter if it's high level, low level, or if it doesn't even say. If it says MET amplification, they're eligible for this. And then I mentioned this before, but I'll just say it again here. There are several ways to demonstrate MET amplification. It could be from the blood using ctDNA or from a biopsy. And then just now, this is true for all of the lung map studies, but it's been this way for 1900G since the beginning. Testing can be done centrally or locally. So if you do your test, if your practice is to get blood from patients or to biopsy them, you can use that test, or you could do a biopsy and submit it to lung map for testing, and they will do it for you. So either one is fine. Here's the updates, and this is my last slide. I mentioned already that we have lowered the number of patients that are as our goal. We had a goal of 60 patients with a goal of 2 a month. We opened this study over 2 years ago, and we have 21 patients registered. So I like to say this is slow and steady, where we are not quite meeting our accrual goals, but we are continuing to accrue on a monthly basis. So thank you all so much for supporting the study. I was just talking to my friend and colleague, Chris Bike, who just told me about a patient she just recently put on the study. And so I know people are thinking about this, which is amazing, but we have to still think about it more because we are looking now with our revision for 40 eligible patients. So we're about halfway there. And our goal is to finish accrual by the end of next year. So there's still time. But keep an eye out for these patients. The other thing the amendment did was it relaxed eligibility criteria around blood pressure. So this is something we kept hearing from sites, that their patients were not eligible because of our strict blood pressure requirements. We've relaxed that a bit in the new amendment. And then I mentioned we are also added that we're looking closely at edema and changes in weight. So here's our contact information, and always happy to answer questions, so please just reach out. Thank you so much.
Can I make a quick comment, Sarah?
Sure.
So I think this will be very useful to help promote this study. When we talk about the incidence of MET amplification as a mechanism of resistance in EGFR mutated lung cancer, all those studies have been done over the lifetime of that patient. So in other words, they look for MET if the patient progresses really early. They look if it's 4 years later. In the FLORA study, and I know you know this, if the patient progressed on osimertinib within the first 18 months, overwhelmingly, the mechanism resistance was MET amplification. If it was 2, 3, 4 years later, then it was more likely a secondary resistance mutation if they found anything. But I think what it tells us is if you have a patient who seems to be progressing within the first year, really check it out, because this is likely it.
Yeah, check it out no matter what, but I agree. The early progressors seem to be the ones who have this. Am I allowed to answer questions?
Oh, if it's too late, I don't know, I could ask it offline if we're running behind.
Just go ahead, answer it.
Just was wondering, in the, given the changes in standard of care, I know the rationale for osimertinib as last line of therapy in terms of the testing efficacy under the selection pressure of EGFR-directed therapy, but given the evolution of standard of care, any thought to making it like, there's Mariposa 2 now with amivantamab or ami laser, that may boost accrual a bit, even though the frequency of MET amp after amivantamab or ami laser is lower. It's not non-zero, and we don't know the rate of low MET, kind of like that we'd be eligible for in terms of that determination.
No, it's a good point, and I sort of brushed over that when I was talking about how the standard of care has changed, but that is true. There are some patients probably many patients who at some point, whether it's first line or later lines, are getting amivantamab. We could talk about changing it to include those patients. I guess my thought was, like you said, it's much less common to get MET amplification when amivantamab is used, but not zero. So thank you. That's something we can talk about as a group. For now, it's not allowed. You have to be on osimertinib. You could be on ami-osi, which I know sometimes we do off-label. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, and I will present for Christian Rolfo and Suresh Gagil for the S1900J, and here we have a phase 2 study of amivantamab in participants with MET amplified non-small cell lung cancer that is not because of a resistance mechanism, but primary MET amplification. And again, MET amplification is what is required. And we'll talk about it, we now allow any platform for that testing. The primary endpoint is response by RECIST, and there are 2 cohorts, a non-squamous cohort looking for 40 eligible patients, and a squamous cohort also looking for 40 eligible patients. It's the subcutaneous version. That is every 2 weeks dosing, and I don't know if that might change if the dosing gets settled on for a 4-week dose for amivantamab. And again, MET, on top of being a resistance mechanism, is also a driver of tumorigenesis. Mutations, we have MET exon 14, which we'll hear about next, but we also have MET amplification. It's rare, but potentially actionable, about 3 to 4%. And most of the data is collected in non-squamous, but some data also exist in the squamous cell population, and thus the cohort for squamous cell. And again, this is not a acquired resistance mechanism, but a de novo mechanism of oncogene-driven lung cancer. And so there are some studies looking at TKIs in MET-amplified lung cancers, and with a response rate around 30% and PFS about 4 months and overall survival of 9 months. So clearly we can do better. Again, here are eligibility criteria. The MET amplification by FMI has changed to any platform. They're pretty standard eligibility criteria. Performance status 0 to 2 is allowed. Again, the amivantamab is given subcutaneously, first on a weekly basis and then every 2 weeks. The revision 1, again, highly anticipated, and this was now released to sites on September 15th, so it is available to you to update the testing beyond FMI to utilize any platform for MET amplification, and also allows for other KRAS activating mutations, which was not clear before, but if they have a prior mutation and could have secondary resistance, these patients are not included. The study opened in September 2024, so about a year. 2 patients have enrolled, and again, we anticipate this to improve now that we've increased testing to multiple platforms. And here are our study chairs and emails for questions. And we have Dr. Pak online to present S1900K.
Hi, yeah, hopefully I'm coming through. But thank you for entertaining my ability to do this remotely. I apologize, I couldn't be there in person. But I'll briefly present S1900K, so the background behind it, some of the changes that we made for accrual purposes and where we are now with regards to accrual. So this is our randomized phase 2 study of tepotinib with or without ramucirumab in folks with MET exon 14 skipping positive, stage 4 or recurrent non-small cell lung cancer. Can we go to the next slide? Or can I do that?
We're working on it.
Wonderful, thank you. So the genesis of the idea really dated back to observations that we had on the VISION study as well as other studies about mechanisms of resistance to MET inhibition in the context of MET exon 14 skipping, understanding that sort of on-target secondary alterations in MET happen in about 17% of patients, but in the grand scheme of things, that's the minority of patients, and we didn't really have, at least from a genomic perspective, a good sense of what was going on. There's a body of literature that suggests that MET inhibition can induce resistance through VEGFR2. So the idea is that in homeostatic conditions, VEGFR2 is being degraded and is not really signaling either in the periphery or in the tumor cell. And this is at the level of the endoplasmic reticulum. But the idea is when MET inhibition is present, this relieves an ER mechanism for VEGFR2 degradation, increases VEGFR2 signaling, receptor expression and signaling, and in that way can engender that compensatory switch to VEGFR2 signaling as a bypass pathway mechanism. So again, an inducible mechanism of resistance that importantly is not genomically encoded. So this is all happening at a proteomic level really, which of course we don't really have the tools to probe. And so by inhibiting that, then you can get improvements in efficacy. You're right to go to the next slide because I was about to go to the next slide. The other part of this is early on, as we all know, and as Sarah was talking about, there is this unusual class effect for selective MET inhibition in terms of the very high rates of peripheral edema, much higher than with any other drug that we use in oncology. And We don't really understand why that's the case, but we do know that VEGF-A is implicated quite strongly in lymphangiogenesis. And there's a very nice mouse model of lymphangiogenesis using murine ears published in the early 2000s that demonstrates this. And probably you can ignore the text and just look at the pictures, but the pictures on the left show control mouse ears. The one on the far left is when colloidal carbon is injected into the ears. The black is the fine lacy lymphatics that are surrounding the capillaries, and that's what you would expect to see. And the idea is that when you inject that colloidal carbon, within 20 minutes it's cleared because the lymphatics are working. But when VEGF-A is, there's forced expression in the mouse through an adenoviral vector construct at the 0 minute time point, you get highly deranged lymphatics, and that's the black clumpy mass of lymphatics delineated by the colloidal carbon. So already you know that that's highly deranged. And in addition to that, they don't work very well. So even after 150 minutes, there's not very good clearance of the colloidal carbon. So you can sort of think about how that might be happening in patients when MET inhibition is present, and it kind of makes sense that this might be the mechanism of action. In addition to that, it makes sense from the kinetic standpoint because peripheral edema is not something that occurs immediately. The median time to onset in vision is about 8 weeks. So it takes time to present itself, and as we all know, it takes a very long time to unwind itself, arguing that this may very well be something physiologic as implicated in this model. Next slide. And so that led to the hypothesis that dual VEGFR2 inhibition and MET inhibition can both increase efficacy and decrease toxicity by, again, blunting that bypass pathway mechanism intratumorally that gets set up and induced by the act of inhibiting MET. And then after that, potentially abrogating in the periphery the dependency on VEGFR2 and VEGF-A, improving the development of edema, but also some of those other squirrely side effects that we see with capillary leak, like effusions and hypoalbuminemia. So trying to kill two birds with one stone, essentially. And so the schema is shown here. And I guess we can go through all of it at this point. It's a very straightforward study. Initially, it was open as a second-line study and beyond when it had opened and required folks to be MET inhibitor naive, angiogenesis inhibitor naive. Otherwise, it was quite porous. But the issue is that we were having accrual difficulty for reasons that were quite understandable, for reasons the sites themselves were telling us, which is they're picking these things up earlier and earlier, often at the time of diagnosis, and they would like to treat patients in the first-line setting. And so that led to an amendment that was activated, I think, in March of this year, and I'll get into what happened afterwards, to make this line agnostic. And that's what Mary had presented, this is a trial that's open in the treatment-naive setting as a result. Folks are randomized to getting tepotinib or ramucirumab in standard dosages versus tepotinib. And the primary endpoint is overall response rate. Secondary are other secondary time-dependent endpoints, but also we're looking at frequency of edema and now optional lymphocytography scan endpoint, made optional because a lot of sites were having difficulty figuring that part out for reasons that are understandable. We don't really do this in the lung cancer world, but it is a nice way to sort of semi-quantitate lymphatic dynamics. Next slide. So the accrual status as of September 19th, 2025 is there. It's updated. We're at 14, which is quite good because the majority of these patients were accrued in the past 6 months. In fact, it's more than 10 now. I think it's 11 or 12, which just goes to show you that the sites were right and that we were, I think, in good standing making that pivot to make a line agnostic. We are averaging about 1 to 2 patients a month now, which is what we had anticipated at trial inception. So I think we are off to a very good start, and our sponsor partner is quite happy, I think, with this as well. So I'm encouraged by the accrual that we've seen so far. Next slide. And that's it. I'm a contact, Juning's a contact. And so any questions, folks have been very good at emailing the medical query email address. So thank you.
Thanks so much. And if there are any pressing questions, otherwise, please utilize these emails and contact us with any questions. Thank you so much, Paul. Next, we'll have Dr. Lee discuss 1800E, a randomized phase 2-3 study of docetaxel and ramucirumab with or without cemiplimab for participants with previously treated platinum and immunotherapy recurrent or stage 4 non-small cell lung cancer.
Thank you for reading that long title. So I'm filling in for. So I think I make it simple. We talk about the lot of background already, so we all know, and PD-1, PD-L1 inhibitor has been incorporated with platinum-based chemotherapy as a standard of care first-line treatment. We've seen survival benefit, but unfortunately, majority of the people will develop resistance. And for that, and docetaxel without ravulizumab remains the standard of care. And recently, with Pragmatica SWOG 2302 study that was reported at ASCO, and showing that adding ravulizumab to pembrolizumab, it actually kind of equivalent to docetaxel, or just like investor choice of chemotherapy. So that really raised the question showing that both chemotherapy and angiogenesis inhibitors will be important. And so also with the first-line study showing adding angiogenesis inhibitor to PD-L1 dual antibody, actually showing that's also promising result. They're also showing that Sarah and Dr. Peck already show, and angiogenesis inhibitor ravulizumab here, and really helping with the target therapy, synergism with the chemotherapy. Now we also have a promising overcome resistance to immunotherapy. So that's the rationale coming to the SWOG 1800E. So both arm of the patient would get docetaxel with ravulizumab, and then the experimental arm adding cemiplimab, and want to see that whether they will overcome the resistance and increase overall survival. The study is designed 1-to-1 randomization, looking for patients who gain acquired resistance to PD-L1 or PD-1, and that's defined as 84 days or 12 weeks after the treatment. The study is stratified by the histology and the performance status of basic 0 to 1 because of chemo component. The study was activated on April 28th, and as of yesterday, 316 sites has been activated with 24 patients enrolled and 12 on each arm. Because we don't have any safety data for the triple combinations, and we have a 12 patient enrolled. And so far, with the weekly safety report, we haven't seen any concern. Of course, we were waiting for Mary and Katie, the data team, to show the get a safety report. So with that, I think I'd really like to thank everyone's support, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, and we're very happy to have the unmatched sub-study open, and we had some good discussions about this earlier today with our site coordinators, and happy to address any questions or issues, but here are the contacts if needed. And again, Dr. Wakar is with us in the audience, and regrets not being here today, but hopefully she'll make it to the next one. All right. So I think we asked and answered questions during the presentations, but I'll allow anybody, if you have any pressing questions, I'll take that as a no. And online, we don't see any questions. So I think we can move on. We'll have a brief, just sneak peek, if you will, at S1900N. And this will be presented by Dr. Jonathan Reese.
Hey, thanks everybody. Just wanted to briefly talk about S1900N, which will hopefully be coming to a lung map platform study near you Q4 this year or Q1 next year. It's a randomized phase 2 study of, TROP2 ADC alone, PD-1 VEGF bispecific alone or combination TROP2 ADC and PD-1 VEGF bispecific together in patients with the actionable genomic alteration, positive stage 4 recurrent non-small cell lung cancer. Want to acknowledge the study chair, Susan Scott, who's done a great job developing this protocol, as well as Dr. Mary Redmond, also statistical chair, John Rangel, the champion, Janelle Gray, and of course, Karen Reckamp here. Here are my disclosures. So this study will be in metastatic non-small cell lung cancer. They'll have to harbor an actual genomic alteration, kind of your classic non-smoking associated EGFR, ALK, ROS1, among others. We're excluding BRAF and KRAS, progression on or after platinum-based chemo and approved targeted therapy, no prior PD-1, no prior TROP2 to ADC, no more than 3 lines of prior cytotoxic chemo. It will allow stable treated and untreated brain mets. Patients will be randomized to the single agent ADC, PD-1 VEGF, or the combination primary endpoint with a safety run-in, primary endpoint of PFS and ORR, secondary endpoints including your usual toxicity, OS, CNS, PFS, and some interesting exploratory objectives and plasma molecular correlatives. Again, want to just acknowledge the fantastic lung map team, SWOG, Janelle Gray, lead committee chair, and everybody else that just mentioned, and Dr. Scott. Happy to take any questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Quick question for Jonathan. So on the PD-1 VEGF monotherapy arm, do you have any built-in early efficacy sort of look?
Yes, Mary, do you want to?
Sure. Yeah, so it's a 3-arm study, but there's actually, since both of the control arms are also investigational arms, all of the arms are conducted sort of similar to a single-arm 2-stage design where there's an interim analysis at, I think, 15 patients enrolled. So any of the arms in the design could be closed at that interim analysis for lack of activity.
Got it. And then there'll be a 2-arm study ultimately.
Yeah, so I mean,
yeah.
it could be that, only one arm continues. It could, like the combo arm could continue, but the 2 control arms don't continue. It could, I mean, there's all kinds of
complicated.
Mary did a nice job of building in some rules on what goes forward and what doesn't.
But exactly,
depending.
yeah, your point that since we need to look and not just enroll to full accrual before looking.
And for the EGFR arm, do you mandate platinum-based chemotherapy in addition to EGFR?
Yes, patients will have had to have progressed on approved targeted therapy and platinum-based chemotherapy. We didn't want to make the patritumumab study that went up against platinum. It was negative. We thought
So
the
this is
best
for
setting was after.
For all cohorts?
Oh, yes, and all comers, common and uncommon, and exon 20, provided they've progressed on approved targeted therapies.
And platinum.
And platinum. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. And so we have our Drug Selection Committee Chair entering the stage. Dr. Dragnev will talk to us about how to engage with LungMap through the Drug Selection Committee. And this is really one of our most important committees because that's where everybody comes in and starts out. So take it away.
Thank you for inviting us to show how to engage and for mentioning that this is the most important committee. These are my disclosures, and it is the entry point for any idea or concept, and all the studies, the sub-studies that were presented at some point were starting with the drug selection. The first 4 of these steps of the multi-step process are within the drug selection committee, and then after a positive vote, it goes into the actual process of protocol development. The key is to have an idea. It shouldn't be an idea you woke up one morning and you thought this will be a great thing to do. You have to do a little bit more, and this is several bullet points of what your idea should include before you come to the drug selection committee. You have to have an agent in mind. If it has a name or if it has a number, you should know who makes this agent. Now, if you have a contact, you should let us know, or if you have contacted them and they've said, oh, this is great, we can also make these connections, the LungMac team. Some background on the agent. What is the population that you want to target? If it's a biomarker specific study, I mean how frequent or how uncommon it is, what type of an assay it is. Briefly, the eligibility criteria. It doesn't have to be pages and pages, but the key points. The actual study schema. Is it a single arm? Is it with a comparator? And what the primary and secondary endpoints are in general terms, and some preliminary statistical considerations. Please do not put any numbers in your schema until you've spoken with Dr. Redman. You're going to get in trouble, like I have. And if you talk to the potential industry collaborator, mention the benefits of LungMap. They will have access to more than 800 sites. It's a mixture of academic and community sites. The patients are already identified because a molecular testing is required for entry into LungMap. And you can have the same patient that enrolled in one study, then be reassigned to a different study later on. For the industry collaborator, it's important to emphasize it is a single contract. They don't have to contract 800 sites. It's a single contract with LungMap. And then the budget is not, it includes more than what a typical site will require. It is the infrastructure, the statistics and data management. If it's a trial with registrational intent, it can have the additional auditing. So there are a lot of elements that are included in the budget that sponsors typically don't think of. A non-specific measure of the activity of the drug selection committee are the number of meetings. They don't necessarily translate into actual positive outcomes, but as you see, we've been quite active with the monthly drug selection committee meetings, just concept introductory meetings, and our administrative meetings, and this is as of the end of August. But the real measure of the activity are the studies that are in development or the concepts that are in development. The first three in yellow are concepts that have been approved by the drug selection committee, are in different stages of protocol development. We heard about 1900N. 1900P is a study combining an mTORC and a PI3 kinase inhibitor. 1800G is the IL-27 that we heard at the lung session. And we have at least three concepts in development in different stages. One with a HER2 TKI in combination with an antibody-drug conjugate, a PCSK9 inhibitor in combination with an anti-PD-1. This is a cardiovascular drug. And hopefully we will have a concept with the next generation PARP inhibitor with Dr. Reese. And this is how you can engage with the drug selection committee.
Thank you. We can take any questions while you're up here, since we don't have much room at the table. We expected to have more room at the table, but any questions for Dr. Dragnev at this time?
Nothing online.
And these, Jennifer, these slides will be available to members on the website at some point, or, okay, so these are things that you can go back to. So thank you for the roadmap and the information. I think it's incredibly helpful. And in the same tune, we have Dr. Neal online, and he's going to talk to us about how to engage with the LungMap TM, or Translational Medicine Committee, as our chair of the Translational Medicine Committee.
Hi, everybody. Can you see and hear me, or at least hear me?
We can hear you, and we see that you're online.
All right, perfect.
Thank you for joining.
I'm in clinic, having trained in Chicago. I'd much rather be there with you than here on Friday afternoon clinic, but I send my regards, and we'll try to get you out to dinner soon. So we can go to the next slide. So the LungMap Translational Medicine Committee was formed in order to take advantage of all the specimens that we've collected for LungMap, not just for patients that have enrolled on sub-studies like you've heard about, but the many thousands of patients that have actually enrolled and had central molecular testing, as well as those who have more recently enrolled with outside molecular testing. So we're trying to make discoveries. We're trying to utilize the expertise in LungMap for physicians and physician scientists, including pathologists and immunologists and others. And the goal today is to try and provide clarity and awareness of how to collaborate with us in performing research using the specimens and data that we've collected for LungMap. We also are hoping that we can do more research and inform the next generation of study concepts. For example, if we can find new predictive biomarkers based on retrospective analysis, then we could think about creating new sub-studies based on those biomarkers. Next slide. So this is a roadmap slide that I put together about a year ago, and not much has changed since then. But if you're an investigator out there in Zoom cyberspace or sitting in Chicago right now, basically the very first step is you can let us know. So I am the chair of the Lung Translational Medicine Committee. You're welcome to send me an email and say, hey, I have this concept. Does this make sense? Can we float this concept? We like concepts that are investigator initiated, right? Or at least investigator supported. So somebody in an academic setting who has some connection to SWOG, LungMap, or the cooperative groups, bringing the concept to us. But it can certainly be a concept where you're working with a company or a partner to put those together. We've gotten a couple of concepts that are directly from companies, and then we ask around, is there somebody who wants to help support this concept and be a champion within our group? But we really want the drive to be from our investigators and our academic folks. So submit the idea then for review. We will help you assess the availability of data and specimens. We will probably invite you to come and present for 15, 20 minutes and discuss the concept at our meeting. We can make it confidential where not other companies are coming and listening if you choose. Then we would invite, if we're interested, to draft a translational medicine proposal. That's a short form. I will point out that you need funding for these concepts. So there is a charge in pulling specimens out of the banks. And then whatever the actual research cost is, there needs to be money to support all of that cost for research. These are not huge amounts of money, but the central cooperative group structure, the LungMap structure, doesn't have money that they have set aside for translational medicine research right now. Then we'll do statistics review, usually with Mary Redmond, Katie Minicello and her group, LungMap leadership. Then basically we're done. We'll say we approve, or why don't you keep revising this, or we don't approve. We rarely say that once things have gotten that far. Pull in the LungMap leadership SWOG review. You need SWOG support, submit the proposal. And then, of course, there's the CTEP and NCI approval step, which, usually they say to us, we try not to get in the way of things that are, specimens that won't be used otherwise, but we do need fairly strong statistical designs, justification, and a budget to get it all the way through. So this is basically the key slide for today. We can go into all these details. Mainly, I just want to provide these slides for you. You can go to the next slide. Yeah. I want to provide all of this to you. Make sure that if you're asking for money, you ask us whether we can use the samples 6 months before a grant deadline, right? But we understand that there's a cart and a horse thing where it may be hard to get the funding until you get the promise of the samples, but you can't get the samples until you get the funding. So we get that. We'll work with you. We can go to the next slide. So drafting the proposal, we'll send it to you. Drafting the budget, we can help out with that if needed. Next slide. Stat Center review, we talked about this. Number 6, LungMap leadership, high-level review. Next slide. Letters of support, submitting the proposal, and then funding the proposal. So, I don't want to dwell on this today, but basically today I'm here for an advertisement to, email me, come to our translational medicine committee meetings if you want. They're held once a month. And we're here to help and here to make sure that we're utilizing all these samples that we've collected on thousands of patients. Next slide. Yep. So acknowledge the catch-22, like I talked about, of grant and needing samples the same day. And then there are some intellectual things. So usually we don't need to have intellectual property within LungMap. But if you have private intellectual property around your idea, then those things need to be contracted and discussed. So the earlier the better, and email me. Next slide. Here's an idea of all the samples that we have. Again, I'm presenting this to you for just an idea of like, what do we have out there? Lots and lots of blood samples and quite a few tissue samples overall. Next slide. Here's the actual numbers of all of these, so you can see there's thousands of blood samples and hundreds to small thousands of paraffin unstained blocks. We're actually doing some partnership with pathology companies right now in order to try to test those, use AI technologies, and come up with better predictive biomarkers. Next slide. And so there's my email, which I said you can go ahead and email, and to get out to your entire group. Mostly this is for approving new NGS things, but the LungMap NGS goes to everybody on the TM committee as well. Happy to take any questions. And like I said, I'm trying to get you guys to dinner.
Thanks, Joel.
Thank you, Joel. Any questions for Joel? And again, we want to make sure that people feel included and know how to get through this process and join the TM group if interested, because it's a huge, huge resource, and we love new ideas. And again, a pretty rare thing to have this more than a decade-long resource of samples that have blood and tissue in many cases across decades in lung cancer. And again, thanks to David Gander in the crowd here and Mary Redmond, who's been here since the beginning. Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate everybody who's worked strongly from the beginning to help support this incredible resource that we have. I'll note on the patients that didn't go on sub-studies, we have some survival information, but we don't collect detailed treatment information between the time they go on the sub-study and that. So less outcomes information, but we have enough that we can come up with interesting hypotheses. And we have, of course, very high quality NGS testing on everybody.
And we'd like to thank our LungMap staff that works on everything here, especially Jennifer Beeler and Gabe Chadwell, and back in the back there, Jennifer Newsom and Taqwa El-Hussein, who keep us running and keep us honest and keep us on schedule always.
Yes.
We would not be here without all of you. So thank you all for being here. We can clap. And now there's nothing in your way to getting to a dinner or a flight or whatever is next. Thank you so much, and please stay engaged and come back next year.
Cool. All right.
Oh.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. There you go. You're thanking everybody. Okay. Perfect.
Oh.
I always ask, I always email you the questions, right? And it was clear in like